This is my drawing of the Westgate Towers in Canterbury, and I'm just going to lighten the faraway trees here slightly on the canopy edge. Just take away that outline slightly. I'm going to leave this drawing in place because I may need to work on that with pencil. So to create the effect of the stonework, I'm going to look at painting a sky using dry brush. And this is my practice run at the sky, and I do think that's important that we do practice this first because you invested quite a lot in this drawing. So the technique would be to use the brush at a shallow angle to try and produce a torn edge like the edge of cloud, which is after all just vapour and doesn't have a strong outline edge. So I've mixed up cerulean blue mostly with a little ultramarine. And the idea would be to slide the brush at a shallow angle along and draw the cloud. Now there's two things going on here. One is the use of the brush, which isn't typical and might be unfamiliar. And the second thing is thinking about the shape of the cloud. So practicing really would pay off in this case. So these clouds are vaguely cumulus clouds. They've sort of got flattish bases and curling tops, but they've also got torn edges. We previously have done this by lifting out. I've mixed up a lot of this solution of cerulean blue and a little bit of ultramarine, quite a lot of water. The sky is after all the source of light in the painting, so I'm going to try and shift this cloud over a little bit. So shallow angle, little bit of drawing there, and I'm going to try and also minimise the amount of blue on this because it's difficult to do large areas of flat wash with this technique. So that's the edge of one cloud. That's going to be another cloud up there, and this will be the top edge of another cloud. It doesn't matter too much about the buildings at this point. I'm going to shift that over and move this cloud at the top slightly to the left. So this will be the beginning of the cloud underneath here, and then this will be the lower layer of cloud. I can stop there because those edges are more or less where I want them to be. And that's the idea, that you don't paint too much open blue sky, because that then can be a problem to keep flat or to keep even. So this is going to be this cloud at the top, and then I'm going to try and paint in this gap, a little bit of a gap between the cloud, tiny bit of blue just appearing between these two clouds. A slight gap there, and uneven, that's important. There's no repetition of edges. Just get this right here and bring that up. So that's sort of boiling edge to the cloud, just coming along to the edge of the towers. And again, the unevenness of the cloud, it's got to go up there. And this base, so there'll be a sort of broken cloud there, another little bit of cloud possibly there, and a base, flattish base along here, a little bit of blue sky there. Go with accidents. If you have sort of happy accident, then let's use that, turn it to advantage. That should be a little more broken up. I've really got to think about these shapes and draw them as I'm using this technique. So I'm going to see some cloud, blue sky behind these trees. I could always lift that right down to the level of these houses. And then over on the right I've got the flag, which I can lift out later because this is a good lifting colour, the blue. And I'm going to invent a cloud over here because it's a large, otherwise might be a large area of blue sky. Let's see if I can make that work. In theory the clouds lower down are further away and should therefore be narrower, less tall rather. So it's a little bit of sky there. I think that's about right. I'm going to just interrupt that slightly with a little bit of blue, get that to sort of rise up. So I'm going to leave that to dry and think about the water for a minute. So I'll come back to the cloud and put some shadow into that, put some shadow into it, and I'm going to come back and again have a look at this water. When the water and the sky, or the River Stour and the sky, are related obviously because of the sky being the source of light and water reflecting that source. So if I have cerulean blue and a little ultramarine and a little bit darker blue, so that's just slightly denser blue, a little bit of ochre as well, not quite the same brightness of blue as in the sky, but it's got a little bit more ochre, some ultramarine, some cerulean. Let's test that out somewhere else. Yep. So, and the water has a sort of horizontal aspect to it, being fairly flattish river, slow moving water rather. And I'm going to try and use that movement of the brush across here and leave some gaps to create the effect of rippling water. So I'm coming up to these river barges or punts, edges of, and this side to side movement of the brush, and always lift it out there if I need to. So that's where I'm going to have this horizontal movement of the brush, something like that. So the water I'm going to treat in terms of glazes and not try and do it all at once. So a glaze means effectively another translucent layer on top of this. That's just horizontal movements of the brush. So there are white clouds reflecting in the water here. However, they're not really white when they're reflected. So everything that's reflected is a little bit duller. In theory, the ripples become a little bit deeper, lower down. So thicker or higher, fewer gaps. I'm going to be able to lift that edge out a little bit later. Over here on the left, where the buildings are reflected, that would be, I think that would be whiter because there's sunlight on those buildings, but not on the wall that's beside the river. So that's all a bit darker there. There would be some white in the reflections and a little bit more blue just here reflecting the sky above. And this tree, which is quite dark, but that's again a glaze will be a dry layer on top of that. So I've left some light edges to give the illusion of light rippling on the water. I'll be able to lift this out later. Got to leave that stage to dry and come back to painting the shadow into cloud, which I did on this practice go with pale ochre and grey, but this has to be 100% dry first. So I'll see you again in part 2.